Welcome to Baha'i Books and Authors, a podcast which introduces to you writers and the works they've penned related to the Baha'i Faith. We'll explore the inspiration, the process, and the stories behind their work. I'm your host, Jan Grammer. This podcast is produced by World Unity Media, which also produces Baha'i audiobooks. The created world begins. How does the Bible describe this momentous event, and what is the Baha'i perspective on it? Rooted in the Baha'i principle of progressive revelation, Light of the Kingdom, Biblical Topics in the Bahá'í Writings by JoAnn Borovicka explores how biblical topics are echoed and expanded in Baha'i teachings. This is a thoughtful study illuminating the spiritual connections between the Bible and the Baha'i writings. Grounded in theology, JoAnn presents her research with clarity and eloquence, offering beautifully written, accessible insights that make complex spiritual ideas both approachable and meaningful. Whether you're a Baha'i, come from a Christian background, or are simply curious about the relationship between sacred texts, Light of the Kingdom offers a clear and solid guide through shared spiritual terrain. It flows beautifully, and the organization makes profound ideas feel both natural and illuminating. I'm delighted to welcome JoAnn back to the podcast. It's so lovely to see you again.
It's good to see you, Jan.
I just want to say thank you for your wonderful contribution to our earlier episode, Crossing the Line, a memoir of race, religion, and change, which you co-authored with Richard Abercrombie. I encourage our listeners to check out that conversation. It's both heartfelt and inspiring. Let's begin with what inspired you to write Light of the Kingdom?
Oh, Jan, I can tell you that in one word: questions. I had many questions about how the Baha'i Faith and Christianity could possibly be seen as one religion. The book came about because I eventually joined the Baha'i community and found out that the friends in my town were interested in learning more about the connections between the Baha'i writings and Christian teachings. I created a day-long workshop that I called Baha'i Bible Study. And during that workshop, the participants voiced questions on more biblical topics. I'm a researcher. I get excited by questions, so I wrote them down, researched relevant Baha'i teachings, and generated another workshop. The process repeated itself and became a labor of love, really, that lasted over 10 years, involved constant research, regular weekly classes, some weekend retreats, hundreds of participants in South Carolina and Georgia, and hundreds of questions. My book, Light of the Kingdom, was born out of those workshops. I wanted to create a reader-friendly, accessible reference book that offered Baha'i teachings on biblical topics that were of the greatest interest to people that I had served over those many years.
Looking at the table of contents, it follows a structure of the Bible. Why did you choose to organize it in this way?
I would answer that with two words: biblical illiteracy. Through the years of conducting Baha'i Bible study workshops, I found that many people lacked familiarity with the Bible's content. Even if they had been raised in the church, many of the participants did not understand the Bible's different genres, its overarching narrative, or even how to use the Bible reference system to find a particular verse. I found that biblical illiteracy is a recognized modern phenomenon. The Bible has profoundly impacted and directed the growth of 2,000 years of Western civilization. It's inspired art, architecture, literature, philosophy, the rule of law. Its influence on Western civilization is immeasurable. I learned that whenever I began a new Bible study workshop, I'd have to start out with very basic introduction. We'd look at all the different categories of books, their sequence, and how to use the Bible reference system. Then we could proceed with the Baha'i Bible content. So when I started working on Light of the Kingdom, I wanted to organize it in a way that would painlessly teach the readers about the structure of the Bible and the nature of its books. As you saw, I started with the book of Genesis, identified some strategic verses to represent some of the topics in that book, explored the Baha'i writings relevant to those topics, and then moved on to the second book.
Familiar biblical topics or stories take on new meanings through the Baha'i teachings. Could you talk a little bit about what you think the Baha'i sacred writings bring to ancient scripture?
I think that the Baha'i writings bring relevance. They help move people from literal to spiritual understandings, and they give broader meanings to scripture. For an example, angels make many appearances in the stories of the Bible, and they are presented as God's special ethereal assistants. In religious artwork, angels have historically been represented as beautiful heavenly beings with wings and halos. The Baha'i writings also speaks of angels, but the meaning is expanded. For Baha'is, angels can refer to spiritual confirmations, such as a sense of peaceful assurance after the passing of a loved one, or a chance meeting that results in some good fortune. These are real spiritual experiences, angelisms, if you will. The Baha'i writings also speak of angels as blessed beings in this world or the next, who have been released from the chains of self and desire and have become dawning points of spiritual bestowals. The writings state that any person who emanates praiseworthy qualities, high morals, and is the cause of love, concord, and unity is an angel. Through the Baha'i writings, the concept of angel expands from an otherworldly being into qualities of character that will improve life on this planet. So all of us can at least try to have moments of angelness, and we can recognize those who have served like angels in our lives.
That is lovely. Then we all know many angels in our lives, and indeed we can be angels, even if occasionally. I love that. Thank you. Do you have a favorite section of the book?
I do. In this story, God creates night and day, heaven and earth, the sea, the sun, the moon and stars, creatures that fly and creatures that swim. And on the sixth day, God creates land animals and the first human beings. So my favorite verse is, "Let us make mankind in our image, according to our likeness." This is a beautiful story. People have understood it in many different ways, including that human beings look like God. The Baha'i writings explain that to be created in the image and likeness of God has a greater and spiritual meaning. This is actually a quote from the Baha'i writings. It is recorded in the Holy Bible that God said, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness." It is self-evident that the image and likeness mentioned do not apply to the form and semblance of a human being, because the reality of divinity is not limited to any form or figure. The image and likeness of God constitutes the virtues of God. The writings explain that mankind is intended to learn and reflect divine attributes such as mercy, wisdom, justice, patience, forgiveness, and in this way become the image and likeness of God. So far from being either a single created act, this creation story is in the Baha'i writings described as an ongoing challenge. I love how the Baha'i writings makes the first chapter of Genesis a current process and the ultimate goal.
Very profound. Yet another profound concept that you write about in your book is that a prophet's cycle doesn't begin at birth, but when they proclaim their message. Can you share more about that, please?
In the Baha'i writings, the station of the manifestation of God, which is the station of all the prophets of revealed religions, is very unique. In the station of a manifestation of God, all the prophets are one, and the manifestation of God is always the manifestation of God. It never goes away. It is the source of our life and the source of creation and an ever-existing spiritual phenomenon. However, these manifestations do this amazing thing of entering our world, and so there are specific appearances that we notice of human beings who are both human and divine. We have Jesus, Moses, Baha'u'llah, and there are many more, Buddha, Zoroaster. So while these manifestations appear at specific times, and they are individual and they have distinct social teachings. They are at the same time one with God and a continuation of the one religion of God. So in one sense, the cycle of the manifestations is everlasting and eternal and one. In another sense, if you're talking about the historical appearances, the Bahá'í Writings choose to mark the beginning of each distinctive revelation by the moment of the declaration. I think that this isn't so much a spiritual phenomenon as it is a convenience for those of us in the realm of time and space.
Your book is clearly grounded in very careful research. What was that process like for you?
It was heavenly. I am a researcher. I love questions, and I love to find out more, and I love ending up then with more questions. It was a complete joy. And it remains a process of constant discovery. It certainly doesn't end with writing a book.
In doing the research, were there any unexpected connections between the Bible and the Bahá'í Writings that you hadn't noticed before or realized before?
What was unexpected was how much of the Bahá'í Writings used biblical stories in their instruction. Let me give you an example. Abdu'l-Bahá wrote instructions to the Baha'is in the United States. This was during a war, and he knew that all the letters that went overseas were opened and read by the censors. So he wrote his instructions on postcards. He said this was to help the people who were reviewing the mail to not have to be bothered with opening envelopes. I don't know that that's so, but Abdu'l-Bahá wrote messages on these postcards, so they're very concise. I did a study of the tablets of the Divine Plan, what these messages were, and found that every one of them had some kind of biblical reference, referred to a verse or a story or a biblical character. I thought that was astounding. Why did he do that? Because the background of most of the Baha'is in the United States was Christian at that time. And those verses held meaning and could deliver a message in very concise form in their imagery or in referring to that story. I was just, and continue to be, very surprised about how much the Bahá'í Writings draw on biblical stories for spiritual instruction.
That's fascinating. I'm going to go back and look at those messages and look for those, specifically those biblical references. Well, what do you think Light of the Kingdom will bring to the study of comparative religion?
I think it'll bring a great deal to the study of comparative religion, particularly because the book does not compare the Baha'i scripture with biblical scripture. The Baha'i Faith sees the essence of all revealed religions as one unfolding religion of God. The Baha'i Writings state the holy manifestations who founded the religious systems are united and agreed. There is no differentiation possible in their mission and teachings. All are reflectors of reality, and all are promulgators of the religion of God. The divine religion is reality, and reality is not multiple, it is one. Therefore, the foundations of the religious systems are one because all proceed from the indivisible reality. So, in this spirit of oneness, the Light of the Kingdom does not compare the Baha'i Writings to, say, man-made teachings and interpretations of biblical scripture. Instead, it presents Baha'i scripture with relevant biblical scripture, and in doing so, highlights the golden spiritual threads that unite both.
If there's one takeaway from the book that you would like the readers to have, what might that be?
I would say that it would be the concept of progressive revelation of the world's religions. The Baha'i Writings state, this is the changeless faith of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. And I would hope that they would walk away with that feeling.
Your book offers a meaningful invitation into sacred conversation, one that honors both tradition and revelation. Thank you, JoAnn, so much for joining us again.
Thank you.
Light of the Kingdom, Biblical Topics in the Bahá'í Writings can be found at Bahá'íBookstore.com or wherever you get your distribution services. Subscribe or follow Bahá'í Books and Authors with your chosen podcast platform. This podcast is produced by World Unity Media.